Welcome back, Inebri-art. This is your faithful host of some 300 plus episodes now. And today we actually have two guests on. That doesn't happen very often, especially when it's not a band. We get a lot of bands, but we don't get duels on very often. And we have Vig Norris and Hugo de Sousa of the movie that just came out. Yeah, a couple days ago. Mr. Limbo. Welcome to the shows, guys.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks
Glad
for
to be
having
here.
us.
Yeah. So I get a lot of, PR promotional stuff with links, and I checked out the trailer for the movie, and it was kind of like pitched as a horror movie, but I looked at it, I'm like, my general thought was, what the fuck is this? And it seemed really weird and interesting. It didn't seem horrific, maybe more, I don't know, thriller, but it just seems very strange. Like, would you guys classify this as real horror, or like, how would you kind of?
I was classified more of as a existential, like, buddy comedy sort of. There's some weird elements to it, but nothing. It'd be a huge stretch to call it like a straight up horror film, I think.
Yeah, it's not really horror at all. I was pretty surprised when I saw the way it was being pitched too. Like, okay, it's interesting, but yeah, it's not that at all.
Very dialogue based, a lot of back and forth between Vig and I. Yeah, it's a buddy comedy for sure.
Yeah, it seems like you guys had like a real natural rapport. Did you guys know each other before the movie?
Only due to a prior movie that we were in that Hugo starred in called We Used to Know Each Other, and I had one scene with him, and I literally met him that morning before we went to go shoot the scene.
Yeah.
So prior to that, and that was in 2017. So that's the first time I met him. And then once we started, doing rehearsals and everything in 2019, prior to actually shooting, that's the most time I've spent with him.
Yeah, exactly. That scene that was one of the most favorite, like, in that film. We Used to Know Each Other. People really talked about that scene a lot, and I think that's why the director Robert J. Putka decided to put us in a film together. And
this film looked, I mean, the whole trailer, I don't know if the whole film, but it looks like it takes place in the middle of the desert. It looks very unhospitable. Did it suck filming this movie? Because it looks like it might suck.
Oh man, where do we begin? It wasn't really that bad. It was worse for me because I had these little shoes on inside of these very huge boots, and walking on the sand basically killed my feet. So definitely after principal photography, I definitely came away with a couple of bruised toes, really huge blister on my one foot, and that blister didn't really heal until right before we had to come back to reshoots in October. So this was between May and October, and so that was probably the worst part. It really wasn't as hot as it would seem. It was a lot more windy, and we got hit with rain a couple of times more than I would have expected.
Yeah, it could have been much worse. I was expecting to get like fully sunburned and stuff like that, but it wasn't like that. This was such a small production. It was like a miracle that we pulled this together with such a skeleton crew. It wasn't too bad. We moved really fast, so there wasn't. We had one night shoot that was kind of hard to. It was like so cold, we couldn't really see anything because we were like in the middle of a field. But yeah, other than that, it wasn't too bad.
That's so strange because like I'm watching that and be like, oh, it's got to be like miserable hot, and you're like, oh, it's so cold. It's like you forget how cold.
And night was really cold. Yeah.
So, night was terribly cold, but I would say that's probably one of the one acting pieces that I regret, is that because of the fact that it wasn't really that hot and it wasn't really a thing of being out of breath, but I played the character when we were walking doing our talking scenes as very exasperated, because I just always felt like that's how people would be in the desert, but it really wasn't like that. That's the only thing I kind of regret that.
Did you do any kind of research about being in the desert or surviving in the desert? Because it's not really I mean, I don't know. It definitely implies that it's the afterlife.
Yeah.
But I mean, did you guys kind of like research like what it's like getting lost in the desert or watch Survivor Man or anything like that?
Not really,
No.
because we're supposed to be kind of like two idiots who don't really know what they're doing, you know.
That's
We
fair.
don't have a lot of, you know, we don't have skills like surviving skills or anything. And the movie is not really about that. So yeah, not a lot of research. It was just more like rehearsing the scenes and kind of and then like getting there and like allowing whatever is happening to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, true. I would say the idea to think of it this way is that instead of it being the real world example of it being the desert, it's almost like waking up in a dream to a degree where real world scenarios of like you feeling hunger or fear, things like that, don't really hit you in that way. You're just kind of like disoriented, like, how did I get here? But not so much, in the real world sense of like you're in the middle of the desert. What do I do to get home, even though we're still really confused about that kind of thing?
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting way of describing it. You actually made me think of I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Dead Like Me. It's a show about a girl who gets killed and becomes a Grim Reaper, and part of like the Grim Reaper training is they like show you your like corpse basically, and she makes a reference to how it's like I think she refers to it like a Sunday that you drop, how like you look at it and you're just like I just don't want it anymore.
Huh.
And so it was how much of this story is kind of like your idea of afterlife or the writer's idea of afterlife? Did you kind of like did you get to contribute kind of your thoughts into like what that experience would be like?
Now this came from like Bobby's the director's mind for sure. He was going through like an existential crisis when he wrote the film. So this was like came from that. Yeah, we didn't really like, in terms of the characters for sure. We talked about, it's a movie about redemption, like, coming to terms with things that you did in the past, so we in that sense with my character, I did talk with the director a lot about what kind of things he's wrestling with.
Mhm.
But other than that, everything came from like Bobby's mind for sure.
Yeah, coming from Bobby, from my character, Craig, he took some bits of inspiration sort of from my life, but not directly related. Like the character Craig has more of an issue with his mother and some feelings that he's dealing with about that, in the back of his mind. But a lot of this was actually more inspired by, I think, maybe conversations that I had with him about my father,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that it was just like dealing with my father in some ways is not really difficult, but there it's just in the way my father came up in a like a really shitty childhood, and I realized this kind of after the fact that once he started telling me more stuff about his life, and just the fact that he probably did the best that he could under the circumstances of basically being abandoned by his parents. So he did pretty much the exact opposite with me, but he didn't really know how to be nurturing in certain ways. So it was hard to really connect with him in a lot of ways. Like we were very cool, definitely, all the way up through. Ironically, he died a week after we got done with reshoots.
Oh,
Of
Oh
all
wow.
things, yeah, I came back home. I don't know if I ever told you that, but yeah,
No, I didn't know.
we came back home, and that very next Saturday after I came back home, he had passed away that morning, and he had been dealing with being pretty much like almost paraplegic for the last year plus, from 2018 going through to when we were doing the movie. So it was just one of those things of kind of dealing with that. But yeah, Bobby wrote some of that specific, and trying to get me to convey some of that. But I mean, for the most part, it wasn't really me. It was just things that he thought, and just good ways of the conversations that we had, and trying to bring the character to life and make it a little bit more real. Because I would always call him out if something didn't sound quite right.
yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, it's an interesting thought of, if this is again, I haven't seen it, so if this is really purgatory limbo, I mean, it's people who aren't bad and aren't good enough to get into whatever the heaven is.
Hmm.
And just from knowing people in real life, I feel like that would be the most populated afterlife. Like I feel like that would be the crowded place.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's a thought.
I know a lot of good people that have done some stuff that are not good enough or not bad enough to send them to
Questionable.
hell. Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
but like in a gray area, kind of questionable. And yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that the movie is about that kind of stuff for sure.
So
I
not
mean,
to give anything away, but each of your characters has again from the trailer, it seems like you have no memory. Do you have to like
yeah,
rediscover what that is, that the reason why you're there, or what holds you back?
totally. I mean, we can
Yes.
like set up the film so the film starts with like I wake up, my character wakes up in the middle of the desert attached to a broken parachute. He wakes up, doesn't really remember his name and how he got there. And he starts walking and he finds Craig, played by Vig. And he also doesn't remember how he got there. But
But he does have the great line of, "Do I look like someone who would be at Burning Man?" Which
yeah,
made me
totally.
laugh.
Because we've become kind of like investigators, trying to
Yeah.
figure out, like, looking at our clothes and stuff like that, like, how do we got here? And we start walking and meeting other people, and then slowly, like, we start, like memories from our past kind of like start coming. We start having like visions about some stuff that we might have done when we were alive, and yeah, and then coming to terms with that, trying to get out of the desert. Yeah, trying to figure out what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything he said. Exactly.
Did it cause you to reflect on your life yourself? I mean, because we're all human. We've all done things that we're not proud of. But did you like kind of start a tally sheet for yourself of like, okay, the good things I've done, the bad things I've done? Did it make you kind of reflect in that way?
I wouldn't say, not exactly for me. I would probably say the most significant thing that I've just learned, period, and just, over the years of just finally expressing yourself and saying what's on your mind rather than just keeping it always bottled up and or letting people kind of run over you. So I think it's still, for as morbid as it turned out to be, like I said, with the fact of doing those reshoots, that week before or right before I left to go back to California to shoot the reshoots. And I remember my father was saying to me, he was like, yeah, just make sure you be careful and this and the third. And he was saying it that way, like I was out in the desert with strangers. And it's like,
Right.
I'm not out in the desert with strangers. Like, I know these people, like I'm cool with them. Like, they're not going to take me out in the middle of the desert to kill me. Like, this isn't one of those things. Like we pretty much shot a whole movie and we're going back just to finish it. So it was just one of those things that he said, one of those things that just kind of like set me off. And I just kind of was like, yeah, you know what? That really pisses me off. And just, I told him some stuff that really just kind of get it off my chest, like nothing too deep, but I think I had pretty much had enough of that. And I thought it was probably one of those life ironic things of, like I said, coming back right after that. And, within a week, he passes away. And it made me think like, yeah, maybe that whole reflection of just like with my character and dealing with the mother and trying to come to terms with making sure that, he expressed themselves and things like that. I think that part of it really did carry over into real life. But everything else, I think to some degree, Bobby may have written sort of with me in mind and maybe kind of some of my sensibilities, but that would be as far as it went for me. I don't know about Hugo though.
Yeah, Bobby and I had a lot of discussions about like intention versus and actions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more in the camp that, like, having the way you act and the things that you do are like more meaningful. And Bobby was more like in the, just that wrestling with that thing of like having the right intention, but then sometimes your actions don't really reflect your intention.
Right,
like wrestling with all that kind of stuff. And maybe you hurt someone, but you didn't mean to hurt that person. You had different, that kind of stuff. That was pretty much like all we talked about while shooting. Yeah.
It's interesting, Vig. My father passed almost 19 years ago, and it definitely made me reevaluate my life. I mentioned to you before we started recording that I had a comic book shop, and it was like his passing kind of ignited that fire behind me of like, oh, okay, like there's a deadline, and I got to get some shit done. And so it's never a good thing, but it kind of really puts life in perspective. Like, okay, make things happen, and you may miss, it may not work out, but at least you gave it a shot. And so
Right.
to me, that's like kind of the important lesson to learn.
Yeah, I would agree. I think some of that, I would say, like, at least for me artistically, like my father was supportive of me in a lot of ways, where I primarily for the last 15, 16 years have done music. I always wanted to do film first. Like I used to take TV production and things like that when I was in high school, but then doing music and me rapping and doing poetry and all this stuff, I just try to make it go hand in hand with the acting. And then the fact that he was always supportive, but then in that same kind of way of like, probably should do something else. And I think what I took out of a lot of that, even with the acting, and he did like a lot of stuff that I did, but it was always kind of an indifference there. So it made me realize to stop relying or really caring about what other people think. Like, I'm not doing this for you. So if you don't like it, then maybe that's what I'll take from it. It's like, all right, screw you. I'm going to do it anyway, because this is what makes me happy, not what makes you happy. Whatever you did in your life, that path that you went on and you felt like you were content in that way, that's not for me. So I'd rather do what I want to do, pass or fail. That's what I get out of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those, if you can, even if you can squeak by doing what you love, it makes your life more fulfilling.
Oh, hell yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What about you, Hugo? Were your parents more, were your parents supportive of an actor lifestyle? Were they actors? Like,
no, there weren't. No artists in my family. I mean, they're very creative in their own way, but there was in the beginning they were more supportive they were very supportive just by the fact that they didn't ask a lot of questions. They just allowed me to do whatever I wanted to do. But now they're very proud. So I'm lucky in that way. They're proud. But it's hard to. The thing is, like, your family and friends, they can't really be your audience. You know what I mean? Like, they're not they're much more than that. So if you put them in that position, it's never going to work out. You're going to hurt each other, because there's nothing they can say that's going to really like make you happy. They don't really know how to talk about your work. It's not a good idea, I don't think. So honestly, I don't really like ask my parents for like, oh, what do you think of this or that? Like, I mean, if they watch it and if they want to say something nice, I'm happy that they decided to do that. But I don't really seek out their approval in that sense,
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's like I always tell people, I'm like, you need to like give your work to someone that's not a family member that's gonna be like, this is great. But it's also, now that I'm like thinking about it, like even if your parents are critical of your work and not in a bad way, just kind of like, oh, maybe you should try this, maybe you should try that. I mean, I think part of growing up gets just a natural that like, they don't know what they're talking about, they're old. So I wonder if you'd be even able to take their criticism the same way you would take criticism from a peer or someone that like in the industry that you looked up to.
No, you wouldn't, because I've definitely had situations where my mother is not very vocal about some things. Like I'll say it like this, like she saw Mr. Limbo, she said she liked it. Okay, great. And she's seen other things that I've done where she hasn't said she didn't like it. Music wise, for me, it's not her thing. And my father was a little bit more, he was a little bit more critical in trying to understand or, really giving the music a listen. And then when he would come back with some critiques, it's like, well, I didn't make it for you. So, I mean, I don't expect you to like it or whatever. Like, there's nothing that you could say that would make me take that serious, because it's not for you. Like, you're not the demographic. Right. You were born in 1947. I wouldn't expect you to listen to whatever it was I made. But like I said, they had always been supportive, but I would never look to them for their critique. Like my brothers, Yeah, I actually looked to them for critique because I mean, one of my older brother definitely would tell me if he likes something or he does not like it. But yeah, never looked to my parents for critique. Just hey, here's what I did, so you can see what I did, and however you feel about it is how you feel about it. But I'm not asking you what you think.
But
Yeah.
that's a better like thing. It's better to ask like, oh, did you like it or not? It's like to ask for like a criticism. You know, like they're not musicians or they're not filmmakers. So like we know it's like, and it's funny because sometimes they're overly critic because they're trying to help.
Right.
They sometimes they're being kind of like, you know, Michael, they're just being a little bit like mean, but they're honestly just trying to help, but they don't know how to, you know, that's not a situation they're in very often in their lives, you know.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
they're
that's
like,
kind of that harkens back to your intention versus action. You know,
yeah, totally,
they
yeah,
they
their
think they're trying to
intention,
help. Yeah.
absolutely, but they don't know, you know, it's just, but it comes across a different way, you know, and then your kid is kind of like, oh man, they don't like it, or you know, yeah.
And the most common parental and Vig, you touched on this a little bit, advice that I really hate is that, well, you should have a backup plan, or you know, because I mean it's already one foot in the lifeboat, where opposed to if you're in the, you know, kind of a sink or swim, like this is my career that I chose and it has to work. There's a real different mentality that you approach things with, because if you have that, like, well, I can always, you know, I have my law degree, or you know, I'm an accountant or whatever, so I don't need to make my rap career or my, you know, my bluegrass band happen, or whatever it happens to be. There's a different level of commitment where it's like it's this or nothing, and I think that sink or swim makes a huge difference.
It does, and I also think it's just that fine line, like I touched on before, about just being happy. It's funny when people talk about like if you could, when they do those things like on social media, and they say, would you rather be able to go back in time and do everything right, or would you want $10 million now? Like that difference.
Yeah.
I never would pick to go back in time to do everything right, because when we start talking about shit like space-time continuum and things like that in different timelines, me changing something in the past may change my life in a way that I wouldn't necessarily be happy with now. I don't know. And so when I used to get a lot of that pushback from my father in regard to like going to school and, you know, and doing certain things in college, and I think, okay, practically it makes sense. But let's say if I went that path and I met some young lady and then I had a kid, and now I have a kid and my life takes off this whole different path to where I wouldn't have done anything that I've done now. Like, not that everything's the greatest now, but I wouldn't trade that for me, because me doing that thing just because it seems like this is what's practical to do. I deal with a lot of people that I know, friends and otherwise, that have done those things in their lives and they are absolutely miserable under everything else.
Yeah,
like I would
sure.
rather do what I love and not necessarily have the most money than have a good amount of money and be bored to death with my shitty life and wanting to have free time and all of those things that a lot of people don't get. And I don't think people appreciate their positions until, you know, they don't have them or they see the alternative. That's my stance.
Yeah. And I think part of what I love about the creative lifestyle that I live, and I feel like you guys are obviously both creative people, is I have, but I don't punch a time clock. I don't go to the same spot every day. My life is very weird and unusual, and I get to, you know, some days I'm hanging out at breweries and that's quote unquote work. And other days I get to, you know, tour a historic spot for a podcast. And I just, every day is a little different, and I never really know where they're going to go. And I don't really know who I'm going to run into, and just, I just get to meet the coolest people. And
Yeah. I mean, even if you have like I'm sorry, go ahead, Hugo.
No, I was gonna say, like, it's all about like, you know, the connections you make. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, you know, if something, it's like I never regret anything, because it's like, oh, if let's say like I auditioned for a big movie before Mr.
Mhm.
Limbo, and I didn't get it. You know, if I gotten it, I wouldn't have gotten to work with Vig. So I don't look back like, oh, I should have gotten that film or whatever. No, it's like I like, I treasure everyone I meet along the way. So it's like I wouldn't change anything, because if I change anything, I wouldn't have met that person. I wouldn't have like, you know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
just like appreciating the people you're meeting, and
And I mean, so many of those connections just will take you in places you never expected. I mean, look at Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell.
totally.
Sam Raimi's directing some of the biggest movies around. He always drags Bruce Campbell with him. Not that Bruce Campbell is a schmuck by any stretch of the imagination, but he gets to almost, in as far as I know, every movie that Sam Raimi's done, at least in some level. And it's like if you have those connections, but like between you guys, and one of you moves on, you get to bring the other guy with you. And to me, the favorite part of what I get to do is kind of hold the door for the guy behind me and help people, because so many people help me to help the people move forward.
Totally.
Yeah, speaking of which, that is definitely more me than anything else in this particular scenario. Like so Bobby Plicker, writer director, the way that I even met him was 12 years ago. He has a circle of friends that he went to a special program in high school with, and they all formed this group called Seatown Film Factory, and they used to make videos and make skits, a whole bunch of stuff. So within that group, I ended up making friends with one of his friends, Damon Smith, who directed my first 2 music videos. Within that weekend, while we were filming the videos, is where I got introduced to Bobby. Hanging around Bobby, getting to know Bobby and the rest of the guys. Ben Meeser, the editor of Mr. Limbo and the editor of most of Bobby's stuff. He was basically director of photography on the one video, and then he was also in the second video that we had all filmed that one weekend back in 2010. But the point is that me meeting Bobby, we got to having conversations, saw some of the things that we had in common as far as what we loved about film. He started working on his first short, Mouthful, that he actually got financed. I worked on crew for that. And then once he started doing some other stuff, and I was working on crew for that, then when he got his first feature film, Mad, I was supposed to have a part in that, but I started my job the very same day we were supposed to shoot. So the idea that every time he's had something coming along, he always gives me the call to say, hey, we're working on something. You want to come and just hang out or work on crew? Or when we ended up doing the Peter party, he's like, hey, I got this idea for this skit. He sends me the script. Other scripts come in. And then just the fact that he had the role for me and we used to know each other, bringing me out to Vegas to shoot with Hugo in that sense, and then still bringing me along to do Mr. Limbo. So I am definitely a product of Bobby's nepotism in that sense, that since we met, he's brought me along on pretty much everything that he's done since. And that being the case, like I said, meeting Hugo and all these people, it's like, that's the one thing that I like. And I don't know, I can't speak for Hugo, but for me, us shooting this movie was like one of the best times of my life, because it's, even for whatever differences that we may have with some of the people on the cast and the crew, I generally enjoy the crew overall. So I liked being around everybody. And since we were so small and kind of close knit, I enjoyed every bit of my time with everybody that was there.
Same.
Every bit of it.
Same. It was the best time.
And so this was shot in, I'm assuming, outside of Vegas.
Yeah, outside
in
of Los
California.
Angeles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so were you filming something else in Vegas? Is that?
Oh, that was our previous film. We used to know each other.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, we used to know each other, shot in Vegas, but Mr. Limbo, we shot in and around
Barstow?
We were near Barstow. We were in Daggett, where we were staying at the Airbnb, but then we were shooting a lot of this in the Mojave Desert in California. So pretty much in those areas, not very far from Vegas, because that's Bobby's thing, is that he always has this affinity for Vegas. And every time we're shooting, it's like, we always got to take a trip to Vegas at some point to hang out just because. But just a lot of areas there. I would say from where we were staying, we usually still had to travel anywhere from like an hour to almost 2 hours to go to different spots, but this was all in still like Southern California, in essence. Southern mid
We had
California.
one rest day. Did you guys go to Vegas on that rest day?
Yes.
You did, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
We shot
Yeah.
for 4 days, and then we had one rest day, and then we shot for another 4 days. And
Yeah.
they went to Vegas on the
It's
Yeah.
funny. I'd never been to Vegas, but then in the past 4 years, I think I've been 3 times, and it's always for work. And it's
Is
a
it good for
weird
you?
place.
No.
It's kind of lost on me. Like, I'm not a gambler.
Yeah, me neither.
So I kind of, and everyone's like, "Oh, you don't need to gamble if you go to Vegas." I'm like, you kind of have to a little bit. I did enjoy Fremont Street.
Yeah.
What is that?
That's old Vegas. That's where all of the old casinos are.
Got it.
And it's where they kind of created, and they made, like, I don't want to call it a dome, but it's, have you ever seen videos of people doing the
zip
like
line?
the zip line?
Oh,
across
yeah.
that's Fremont.
Yeah.
So that's where Bobby used to like to go all the time. He would want to go to Fremont, to the older stuff, because he didn't like being on the Strip. It's not on the Strip. But the Strip is all the newer stuff.
Yeah, to me that's fun because there's like, I think there's at least 3 stages with different bands playing, and it's crazy. They're pretty close, but you can't hear one from the other. And there's this crazy light video show that's projected above you. It's like a cleaner Blade Runner. It's just a lot going on. That was a lot of fun, but the first 2 years I was out there for like a trade show that I was working for, the company I work for, and you work all day at the trade show and you try to let off a little steam at night, and then you crash and you do the same thing. Last time was for our podcast, and that was fun because we worked for 45 minutes.
Yeah, I would agree with you in that sense, that I had never been out there outside of it being work related, because I had never been to California or Vegas prior. So when I came out to do my scene for We Used to Know Each Other, first time I made it to Vegas, and then when we got done, they actually completed the film that week. And then I went to go actually visit some friends that lived in LA, or actually Pasadena at the time, and I stayed with them and actually finally got to see LA for the first time. So that was all still partial pleasure, but I came out there because of work, and I tried to take advantage of it. And so every time when we came out to shoot Mr. Limbo, whether we were scouting locations or any of the other shooting, I always came out early, and I would leave out later than whenever we were shooting, because I would spend the rest of my time actually seeing the sites and hanging out with some friends that lived out in the LA area.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of that, what makes a creative job or lifestyle so much fun is, I can go to Vegas, I can go to wherever, and I'm still working, opposed to like just punching a clock at the same office building, saying the same people. Do you guys have like the quote unquote day job that you have to punch the clock for?
Definitely. In fact, I left my job early today to make sure that I could make this. And it's cool.
Thank you.
and yeah, it's cool. It's important to me because, I mean, this is my actual passion. It's like, and actually I work for a place that's cool enough where even I don't tell people that I do music and then I act. So it's funny. I keep it private except for my supervisors, because a lot of times I may have to tell them like, yeah, I'm gone for a while for this or this reason. So my current supervisor actually used to work in theater, and she's really excited about it. So when I told her, I said, yeah, I'm leaving early today and tomorrow because I have all these interviews. And she's like, oh, I'm so proud of you and all of that. So it's cool in that sense. But that's also, I was going to say earlier in talking about those things about your passion, where I can still work a day job if I have to keep the lights on. But then the fact that if I still do what makes me happy outside of that, I don't feel that internal struggle as if, there's just nothing for me to do that brings me that inner peace that, like I said, a lot of people don't get, because I just know so many people that I used to make music with, say almost 20 years ago. And then a lot of them just stopped, had kids, things like that. And they have no desire to do it anymore. And they're just doing regular everyday things, which on one hand is fine, but you can kind of, in some cases, you can see that deadness in their eyes where they're not quite there. And they kind of regret giving up a lot of those things.
What about you, Hugo? Do you have
A day
day
job?
job? Yeah.
Not right now, but you never know. But I'm just freelancing, like kind of like helping my friends make movies. Just whether as an actor or producer or writer. Yeah, just making films with my friends right now. But
Yeah.
you never know.
It's so funny because it's such like Joe Average looks at whoever and they think, oh, their life must be great. Like I got to interview Joey Santiago, and he's the guitarist for the Pixies,
Mhm.
and he was telling me the Pixies had broken up, and he tried some other things and this, that, and the other thing, and he had taken the exam to become a postal worker and was just about to accept a job when someone reached out and been like, hey, can you write some music for, I can't remember the TV show, but for a TV show. And that brought him in a whole new direction. And it's like,
Oh wow.
it's that creative life of, you always have, you're always just like a change in the wind away from like having to take a real job.
Yeah, totally. So
Yeah.
unpredictable.
What's next? Like, what do you guys, where do you see your career going? Where do you want to go? Do you guys want to be cast in a Marvel movie? Do you want to stay with lower budget movies? Like where's your heart at? I know Vig wants to be in a Marvel movie. There's still other stuff behind us.
I pretty much want to be in, I don't want to say anything because there's a lot of things locally. To be specific, like I know Hugo's saying, you're still in LA, right, Hugo? I don't want
I am, yeah.
We got to turn, right.
Yeah.
So I'm here, Cleveland, Ohio. I mean, there's a lot of film projects going on here locally, some of which pretty professional, others of which not so much.
Yeah.
The ones that are not so much, I may still do and still have some fun with. So I don't want to say that I just take anything because there are a lot of things out there that I'm just like, yeah, I don't want to do that type of thing. Just because it's once you start doing things just for, and I'm not even going to say for the money, because a lot of this could either be free or just for very little, but I would want to do anything that makes me feel like I'm actually really being challenged as far as acting, not playing to a certain type, that kind of thing. Because I think a lot of people get comfortable with, especially if you do something else, like if you're into music and then you get chances to do things where you're acting, it's like, oh, well, I'm just going to still play someone that does music. Like, try something else. Like, I'd rather have range and have things of quality there than anything else. So yeah, I would like to just work with whoever. If somebody's looking to work with me and they've seen my work and they want to work with me, I'm pretty much okay with that, as long as it feels right and money's not really an issue. Mm-hmm. And then outside of that, I've been coming to terms with the idea that I'm circling around being done with music, only because my music for me was always going to be a finite thing. Like, I thought I was going to be 3 albums and done. And I just had this stunted growth over the years of just doing different projects, doing other things that took me here and there. So I never really got to say whatever I wanted to say. And once I'm done saying it, I can't see me really making the music as much anymore, but I still love performing. That's the whole thing. I really don't like the process of really having to write stuff and being in the studio, but I do like being on stage. And like I said, I absolutely love, I love being in front of the camera and on set more than anything. That's really what I wanted to do. Because all I did is, as a child, like I have 2 older brothers, but they're considerably older. So I came up in life as almost like an only child. So all the times that I spent playing with my action figures and picturing what it would be like if I was in this movie and thinking of these adventures, that's been my whole life, not wanting to be necessarily some rapper, rock superstar. It was just like, no, I wanted to make film, period.
Nice. What about you, Hugo?
I'm acting my friends' films. I actually just acted in a film in Fresno, directed by the DP of Mr. Limbo, Mackenzie Davis. And also I'm making my own films. I just directed and wrote a short film that played Slam Dance in January, and I just went to New York with it. Played a rooftop summer series there. So yeah, making films. I'm having fun right now making short films, but eventually I'll do the jump to a feature in the next 2 years.
With the things like YouTube and streaming platforms, is it much easier to get people to notice or eyes on your short films now, opposed to, I mean, before there was no real platform for it. They weren't going to show them on TV because they weren't long enough to advertise. They're not going to show them in a theater.
Yeah. I mean, going to festivals helps if you can like play some good ones, and you can put it on Vimeo. You're certainly not going to make money out of a short film, but hopefully you can build an audience, and just, your community might appreciate your work, and it's just, just momentum building kind of. But yeah, it's right now it might be easier to like convince your peers to watch a 10-minute good short than like, because it's just 10 minutes. If you ask them to watch like a 2-hour film, they might take a while for them to like get around to it. So that's the good thing about shorts. It's not as big of a commitment, so if it's good and if people enjoy it, it actually becomes like a small success within your community.
I mean, if you can make them 60 seconds, you can put them on TikTok.
I know, man. Hopefully, I know that's bleak.
Yeah, I know. So September 2nd it comes out. So when this is up, Mr. Limbo will be available. Where can people find it? Is it going to be on streaming platforms? Is it going to be on
I don't know which ones, but it's going to be on. I don't know actually yet. But it's going to be available on multiple VOD platforms.
Yeah.
Probably
Shudder.
the
That's
most
the one.
like
I
obvious.
was going to ask if it was on Shudder, because that was the one that I was trying to think of, and I was blanking on it.
Well, that's why I laughed, because I knew that question was coming, and we don't know yet.
Okay. We don't know yet.
Well, Google it, people. Like,
Send me a DM.
DM us where we can watch the movie. But where else? Do you guys have your own website? Vig for your music, or Hugo for your shorts, that you can tell our listeners about?
I have a website. It's called Hugo de Sousa, just because I couldn't get the, HugoDeSouza.com was taken. And you can find me on social media at the Hugo de Sousa. Yeah.
As far as me, Vigatron.com, Vigatron. Kind of ironically, like for our Zoom meeting here, why it says Vigatron 999. Vigatron 999 is where you can find me on all social media. But yeah, Vigatron.com is where you can find my music, and I have a link tree that basically links to, everything that I do, acting and otherwise. So I always say Google me. I joke about that. If you Google Vigatron, myself and a male penis enhancement comes up. the penis enhancement comes up first, and I was there first. It used to be a time when you Google Vigatron, and that was the first thing that comes up. Now I'm the second thing that comes up, other than this male enhancement. And I was like, you got to be shitting me. But thank you for the fact that I actually have the .com. So I wish they would have came at me and said, hey man, we'll pay you all this money to give up the .com, but nope, they didn't. So I'm no one. So yeah, Vigatron.com. But like I said, usually finding that will link to everything else. So yeah, when I'm acting, I'm Vig Norris. When I'm rapping, I'm Vigatron. So just to cut out all the confusion.
So when they search, they can get some rap music and some dick pills all at once.
Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah, you can.
That's great.
If that's your thing.
So I was telling you guys we're about 303 episodes at, and it always bothered me that we never had a regular sign off. So I think just before episode 300, I came up with a genius idea of passing the buck. So I'm going to leave it to you guys. Sign us off, advice, whatever, quick saying, sign us off, and we'll end there.
Okay. What are you thinking, Vic? With advice? You mean with advice? I mean,
advice, one-liner doesn't. Dad joke. I don't care.
I'll say a line from the movie.
Perfect.
Everything is everything. That's watch the movie, and everything is everything.
And thanks for checking out the show today, listeners. If you enjoyed the content today, you can go over to patreon.com/Inebri-art to support the show. You can join over there for just a few dollars a month and help us provide this fun content that you just checked out. You can also email us at Inebri-art.com with your questions, complaints, and concerns, or you can find us on all social medias at Inebri-art or at Inebri-art6 on Instagram. And also don't forget to check out our other shows, Bar Talk Podcast, Old Colony Cast, Inebri-art, and all the other shows on the Inebri-art Network, which you can find at Inebri-art.com. Thanks again for listening.